Existentialism is one of the most significant and influential philosophical movements in modern thought, and its resonance has found a profound and persistent home in literature. At its core, existentialism grapples with questions of existence, freedom, and the often overwhelming sense of meaninglessness that comes with confronting the human condition. Through literature, writers have explored these themes in a deeply personal and profound way, drawing readers into a conversation about what it means to be human in an indifferent or even absurd universe. Existentialism emerged as a distinct philosophical movement in the 19th and 20th centuries, heavily influenced by thinkers such as Søren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, and Jean-Paul Sartre. While the term existentialism wasn't coined until the 20th century, many of its core themes had been explored earlier by philosophers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, who were deeply concerned with the individual's confrontation with existence, freedom, and the void left by a lack of inherent meaning in life. In literature, existential themes have often focused on the individual's struggle to find meaning in an apparently indifferent or even hostile universe. Such themes have resonated with writers across centuries and cultures, but it was during the early 20th century, amidst the backdrop of 2 world wars and unprecedented social upheaval, that existentialism found its strongest expression in literature. The devastation of war, the crumbling of old religious and philosophical certainties, and the rise of individualism gave birth to a literary exploration of alienation, despair, freedom, and responsibility. Existential literature tends to revolve around several key themes: absurdity, alienation, freedom, authenticity, and the search for meaning in a universe that offers no clear answers. At the heart of existential thought lies the concept of the absurd, the idea that there is a fundamental conflict between the human desire to find meaning and the silent, indifferent universe that offers none. This theme is perhaps most famously articulated in Albert Camus' essay The Myth of Sisyphus, where he uses the Greek myth of Sisyphus, a man condemned to eternally push a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down, to illustrate the absurdity of human life. Literary representations of the absurd are abundant. In Kafka's The Trial, Joseph K. is arrested and prosecuted by a mysterious authority, for a crime that is never revealed to him, in a world that operates on arbitrary and irrational rules. Kafka's depiction of a bureaucracy that is not just inefficient but incomprehensible reflects the absurdity of trying to make sense of a world that defies understanding. Similarly, Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot places its characters in a situation where they are perpetually waiting for someone, or something, that never arrives. The play's repetitive structure and circular dialogue underscore the futility and absurdity of human existence, suggesting that meaning, if it exists at all, is elusive and transient. Existentialism also delves into the theme of alienation, the sense of being estranged from the world, from others, and even from oneself. As modern society became more industrialized and individuals became increasingly atomized, existentialist writers expressed the profound loneliness and disconnection that accompanied this cultural shift. In Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, the unnamed narrator is a man who has completely withdrawn from society. He spends the novel in an agonizing spiral of self-loathing and misanthropy, lashing out at the world that has alienated him while simultaneously isolating himself further. Dostoevsky's novel is a deep exploration of the psychological effects of alienation, as the protagonist's inability to connect with others reflects the broader existential problem of human isolation. In existentialist literature, alienation is often portrayed as not merely a result of social or economic conditions but as a fundamental aspect of the human condition. The protagonist of Albert Camus' The Stranger, Mersault, is characterized by his emotional detachment from the world around him. His reaction to his mother's death, his relationships, and even his own impending execution are marked by a cold indifference, highlighting the existentialist notion that alienation is an inherent part of the human experience in a meaningless universe. Another central theme in existentialism is the idea of radical freedom and the burden of responsibility that comes with it. Sartre famously proclaimed that existence precedes essence, meaning that human beings are not born with a predetermined nature or purpose. Rather, they must create their own meaning through their choices and actions. In literature, existential freedom is often depicted as both exhilarating and terrifying. In Sartre's play No Exit, the characters are condemned to spend eternity in a single room together, leading one of them to famously declare, "Hell is other people." The play explores the idea that human freedom is inextricably linked to the presence of others, and that freedom carries with it the weight of responsibility not only for oneself but for how one's actions affect others. Existential freedom is also explored in Jean-Paul Sartre's novel Nausea, in which the protagonist, Antoine Roquentin, experiences a profound existential crisis when he realizes that the objects and people around him, including his own existence, have no inherent meaning. This realization of radical freedom leaves him nauseated and disoriented, as he grapples with the overwhelming responsibility of creating meaning in a world that offers none. Similarly, in Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, the character Ivan Karamazov struggles with the idea of freedom and moral responsibility in a world without God. His assertion that, if God does not exist, everything is permitted, encapsulates the existential dilemma. If there is no higher power or predetermined meaning, then humans are completely free but also bear the full responsibility for their actions. Closely related to the theme of freedom is the concept of authenticity. Existentialist philosophers argue that in order to live a meaningful life, one must live authentically, that is, in accordance with one's true self and values, rather than conforming to societal norms or expectations. Living authentically requires confronting the absurdity of existence, accepting the burden of freedom, and making conscious choices that reflect one's individual beliefs and desires. The struggle for authenticity is a common theme in existentialist literature. In Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf, the protagonist Harry Haller is torn between his desire to live as a solitary intellectual and his yearning for connection with others. The novel explores his inner conflict and the tension between the demands of society and the pursuit of personal authenticity. Haller's journey is one of self-discovery as he confronts his divided nature and seeks to reconcile the disparate parts of himself in order to live authentically. The theme of authenticity also plays a central role in existentialist feminist literature, particularly in the works of Simone de Beauvoir. In The Second Sex, de Beauvoir argues that women are often denied the freedom to live authentically because they are constrained by societal expectations and gender roles. She calls for women to reject the roles that have been imposed upon them and to assert their own freedom and individuality. One of the most compelling aspects of existential literature is its portrayal of the existential hero, a character who confronts the absurdity, alienation, and freedom inherent in the human condition, often with a sense of defiance or resignation. These characters are not passive victims of their circumstances but are actively engaged in the struggle to find meaning or at least to come to terms with its absence. Albert Camus' The Stranger offers one of the most iconic examples of the existential hero in the character of Meursault. Throughout the novel, Meursault is indifferent to the events around him, including his mother's death and his own crime. However, as he faces execution at the end of the novel, Meursault experiences a moment of existential clarity. He rejects the hope of an afterlife and embraces the absurdity of his existence, finding a sense of peace in the realization that life has no inherent meaning. In this way, Meursault embodies the existential hero who confronts the void with acceptance and even defiance. Similarly, in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov's journey is one of existential anguish as he grapples with guilt, morality, and the meaning of his actions. While Raskolnikov initially believes he can transcend conventional morality through an act of murder, he is ultimately crushed by the weight of his own freedom and responsibility. His eventual confession and acceptance of punishment represent a reconciliation with the existential burden of freedom. While existentialism is often associated with the idea that life has no inherent meaning, Many existentialist works also explore the possibility of creating meaning in the face of absurdity. For existentialists, meaning is not something that is given to us, it is something that we must create through our actions, choices, and relationships. In The Plague, Albert Camus presents a narrative of human solidarity and resilience in the face of suffering and death. Set during a deadly plague in the Algerian city of Oran, the novel follows a group of characters who must confront the randomness and absurdity of the disease. Despite the apparent meaninglessness of their struggle, the characters choose to fight the plague and care for the sick, finding meaning in their solidarity and commitment to one another. In existentialist literature, the search for meaning is often portrayed as a personal and individual endeavor. In Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, the protagonist embarks on a spiritual journey to find enlightenment and meaning. Siddhartha's quest takes him through various stages of life: asceticism, indulgence, love, and contemplation, each representing a different approach to understanding existence. However, it is only through rejecting these prescribed paths and embracing his own experiences that Siddhartha finds peace. The novel underscores the existentialist idea that meaning is not something handed down through religious or social systems, but rather, something that each individual must create and discover for themselves through personal experience and self-awareness. Similarly, in Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea, the protagonist Antoine Roquentin's crisis of meaning ultimately leads him to conclude that life has no inherent purpose beyond what he chooses to give it. Roquentin's existential nausea, his intense feeling of discomfort at the sheer fact of existence, dissipates when he resolves to create meaning through artistic expression. This realization aligns with Sartre's broader existentialist philosophy that, while the universe itself may be devoid of meaning, humans possess the radical freedom to create their own values and purpose. A key question in existentialist thought is whether meaning can be found through religion, or whether religious belief merely offers an illusion of comfort in an indifferent universe. Many existentialist writers have grappled with the question of God's existence, often concluding that either God is dead, in the Nietzschean sense, or that his existence is irrelevant to the existential struggles of human beings. Friedrich Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra reflects his belief that traditional religious values had lost their power in the modern world. For Nietzsche, the death of God does not simply mean the decline of religious faith, but also the collapse of the entire system of moral and philosophical certainties that had once provided meaning and structure to human life. In the absence of these certainties, individuals are confronted with the existential challenge of creating their own values and meaning in a world that no longer offers them preordained answers. In Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, the character Ivan Karamazov embodies the existential crisis that arises from the rejection of God. Ivan's famous question, "If God does not exist, is everything permitted?" captures the moral dilemma of existentialism. Without the framework of religious belief, how can humans determine right from wrong? Ivan's existential anguish stems from his inability to reconcile the suffering and injustice of the world with the existence of a benevolent God, leading him to a form of moral nihilism. Yet, the novel does not provide a simple answer to the question of whether belief in God is necessary for moral order, leaving the reader to grapple with the existential tension between faith and doubt. For existentialist writers like Sartre and Camus, the question of God's existence is ultimately irrelevant to the human condition. In Sartre's view, even if God did exist, human beings would still be free and responsible for creating their own meaning and values. In Being and Nothingness, Sartre argues that religious belief is often used as a form of bad faith, an evasion of personal responsibility in the face of existential freedom. By clinging to the idea of a higher power that dictates morality and meaning, individuals avoid confronting the terrifying reality of their own freedom and the need to define their own lives. Camus, too, rejects the notion that religious belief can provide genuine meaning in an absurd universe. In The Plague, the character Father Paneloux initially sees the plague as a divine punishment, a test of faith. However, As the plague continues to ravage the city and claim innocent lives, Penelope's certainty is shaken. The novel suggests that while religious belief may offer some comfort in the face of suffering, it ultimately cannot provide a satisfactory explanation for the absurdity of human existence. Instead, Camus advocates for a philosophy of rebellion against the absurd, a commitment to living fully and authentically in the face of meaninglessness. While existentialism is often focused on the individual's confrontation with existence, it also has important social and political dimensions. Many existentialist writers, particularly Sartre and Camus, were deeply engaged with the political struggles of their time, and their works reflect a concern with issues of oppression, freedom, and justice. In The Rebel, Camus explores the idea of rebellion as a response to both personal and political oppression. Camus distinguishes between metaphysical rebellion, the individual's revolt against the absurdity of existence, and historical rebellion, which seeks to challenge systems of political and social injustice. Camus argues that while rebellion can be a legitimate and necessary response to oppression, it must remain true to its origins in the defense of human dignity. He critiques revolutionary movements that, in their pursuit of abstract ideals, become tyrannical and dehumanizing, ultimately betraying the very principles of freedom and justice they claim to uphold. Sartre, too, was deeply concerned with the relationship between existential freedom and social responsibility. In Existentialism is a Humanism, Sartre argues that individuals are not only responsible for their own actions but also for the impact those actions have on others. He contends that human freedom is inherently social, as our choices inevitably affect the lives of those around us. Sartre's political engagement is evident in his later works, such as The Condemned of Altona and Dirty Hands, where he explores the moral dilemmas faced by individuals involved in political struggles. In existentialist literature, the tension between individual freedom and societal constraints is often depicted through characters who struggle to reconcile their personal values with the demands of society. In Albert Camus' The Fall, the protagonist Jean-Baptiste Clamence is a former lawyer who, after a moral crisis, becomes consumed with guilt and self-loathing. The novel is a meditation on hypocrisy, justice, and the existential conflict between personal integrity and social roles. Clamence's realization that his past altruism was motivated by vanity and a desire for approval leads him to question the authenticity of his actions and his place in society. The influence of existentialism in literature extends well beyond the works of Sartre, Camus, and their contemporaries. Existential themes continue to resonate in contemporary literature, where writers explore questions of identity, alienation, and the search for meaning in an increasingly fragmented and uncertain world. In Don DeLillo's White Noise, the protagonist Jack Gladney grapples with the existential anxieties of modern life, particularly the fear of death and the loss of meaning in a consumer-driven society. The novel satirizes the pervasive influence of media and technology on human consciousness, depicting a world in which individuals are bombarded with information but deprived of any deeper sense of purpose or connection. DeLillo's exploration of existential anxiety in the face of technological and cultural alienation reflects the continuing relevance of existentialist thought in the postmodern era. Similarly, in David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, characters are trapped in cycles of addiction, entertainment, and self-destruction, reflecting the existential struggle to find meaning and authenticity in a world that offers endless distractions and superficial pleasures. Wallace's work explores the ways in which contemporary society fosters alienation and despair, while also probing the possibilities for redemption through human connection and empathy. In the works of Haruki Murakami, existential themes are often intertwined with elements of magical realism and surrealism. Novels like Kafka on the Shore and The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle depict characters who are disconnected from their surroundings and embark on journeys of self-discovery that blur the lines between reality and fantasy. Murakami's exploration of existential isolation and the search for meaning in an enigmatic and often illogical world reflects the enduring power of existentialist themes in contemporary literature. Existentialism has left an indelible mark on literature, offering a powerful lens through which to explore the human condition. Through its focus on absurdity, alienation, freedom, and authenticity, existentialist literature challenges readers to confront the most fundamental questions of existence. What does it mean to live in a world without inherent meaning? How can we find purpose in the face of absurdity? What responsibilities do we have to ourselves and others in the exercise of our freedom? From the existential heroes of Camus and Sartre to the alienated protagonists of Kafka and Dostoevsky, existentialism in literature offers no easy answers. Instead, it invites us to embrace the uncertainty and complexity of life, to confront our own freedom with courage, and to create meaning through our choices and actions. In a world that often seems indifferent or absurd, existentialist literature remains a vital and profound exploration of what it means to be human.